For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Creation, evolution, and we're starting right now. Hey friends, thrilled to have you back at Modern Day Debate. Thanks for being here. We are stoked to have these two experienced gentlemen for this unique debate. So with that, just want to mention, if you're new here to Modern Day Debate, consider hitting that subscribe button. We've got a lot more debates coming up in the future, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. We're striving for a nonpartisan platform. So we want to be as fair as possible to both sides. If we have one view represented in a video, we will have at least one opposing view in that same video, and our moderators will never jump in and start debating. It's fully laissez-faire. We want the debaters to basically have control of the steering wheel. Next, just want to say we got a couple of quick house cleaning things that are super exciting to say the least. So we are pumped that on Friday, April 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this is not a joke, we will have Dr. Robert Price. He's going to come on the show. We're thrilled. Basically, popular Jesus mythicist and just a really fun person to listen to. He's got a very likable personality. I think you're going to really enjoy his personality. Even if you don't agree with him, I think you'll like him. And then, as well as Jonathan Sheffield, who's been a huge supporter of this channel. We've just been so thankful for him being willing to come on so often and helping arrange this debate. And so we're just stoked for this super interesting debate. Basically, the debate title will be, can Christians give an intellectual, historical account for the Christian faith? So that will be really interesting, I promise you that. And also want to say, we have today, our full debate card includes 3 debates. If you missed it, we had one earlier, do atheists dodge debates? Controversial. I know, wasn't my idea. So basically, we had a gentleman propose it, said, hey, we'll host any debate that doesn't get us kicked off of YouTube. So if you guys want one on do Christians dodge debates, we'll host it. We're hosting a debate next week on whether or not Christianity is a hate group, for real. So we're willing to do it. We've got an open mind here. Creation versus evolution is right now at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as mentioned. And then, does the Bible teach creationism? That's going to be between Robert from Sentinel Apologetics. I'm excited to have him back. And then we'll have him going against Nephilim Free. So with that, want to introduce our debaters, both of which have their links down in the description. See down, like right down there. So really excited. Standing for Truth has been here many times, and he loves debating creation evolution. As you know, he is linked below with his own channel. And not only that, but he has a lot of debates over there. I know that he's having a debate with Kent Hovind soon, so a lot of people, love-hate relationship. Some people love him, some people hate him. Kent Hovind will be over there soon, so if you love debates, know about that. Speaking of debates and great debate shows, a Non Sequitur show has got numerous debates, and a posteriori Unum, forgive me for getting that jargled. Basically, he has been on the Non Sequitur show. We've got a great relationship with Steve and Kyle, and like I said, they also have great debates you can check out, so please know about that. And so, a posteriori Unum, or Esteban, as he likes to be called, also, he has been on the Non Sequitur show and has been debating these issues for years, actually, though mostly in written text. And so this is going to be a lot of fun, as we are basically going to be doing a new format. This is going to be rapid fire formal debate. So don't worry if you're like, man, I hate formal debates. Don't worry, it's going to be quick. By quick, I mean this. So I'll just quick read this off and you guys can see for yourself how rapid this will be. The openings will be roughly 8 to 10 for the openings on each side. Of course, we'll start with the affirmative. In this case, it's more of a little bit difficult to know the affirmative because creation versus evolution, but it's the debaters already decided beforehand will be standing for truth. And then, of course, we'll have a posteriori Unum, or Esteban, give his opening. Then this is how the rebuttals will go. 4-minute rebuttals from each. Then second round of rebuttals will be another 4 minutes from each. Then third round of rebuttals will be 3 minutes from each. Then Fourth round of rebuttals will be a short 3 minutes from each. Finally, a 4-minute closing from each speaker, and question and answer for 20 minutes. And with that, we don't want to waste any more time. We're jumping right into it. So I have the clock set for you already, Standing for Truth. So thanks for being here, both of you. We're honored that you guys chose Modern Day Debate. And with that, oh, you got full screen mode we're going to jump into. So with that, Standing for Truth, we are ready for you to start your presentation. I will start the clock on your first word.
Awesome, James. Well, thanks so much. Let's get this party started. We got creation versus evolution. I gotta get rid of this right here. Okay, let's get started. I'm looking forward to this. So pond scum to people evolution, as I've said before, is pure imagination. It's science to say that dogs produce dogs, but it's not science to say that dogs, pine trees, bacteria, and whales are related. There's a lot of imagining going on. Evolutionists imagine that mutations make something new and better. Evolutionists imagine that all these small-scale variations will eventually add up to make something we don't actually observe. Time, as I've said before, is the hero of the story for the evolutionist. Evolutionists and SpongeBob should start a private school together. This is the perfect way for evolutionists and like-minded individuals to teach each other that dinosaurs and carrots are related through common ancestry. Stay tuned for a thorough tour of SpongeBob University. But first, the biblical-based model. Empirical evidence suggests that everything, including all life, is subject to entropic decay. The evidence of entropic decay strongly indicates three very important things. The fall, as recorded in Genesis, was 100% real. Creation and the fall had to be quite recent. Prior to this genetic degeneration, Adam and Eve would have had 0 mutations. The absolute reality of genetic entropy means that goo to you evolution is going the wrong way. Things are degrading. Things are not being taken forward. We observe devolution, not evolution. Looking backward, the sad reality of genetic entropy demands a literal Adam, a literal Eve, and a literal fall. Even looking in the fossil record, we see dragonfly fossils, 3-foot wingspans. We see cockroaches were 18 inches long. We see 8.5-foot centipedes. We see grasshoppers 2 feet long, and buffaloes with horns 12-foot horn span. We see beaver fossils that were 8 feet long. Clearly something was different. Look at the megalodon, for example, 80-foot shark. Genetics confirms biblical creation. Modern genetics has discovered Adam and Eve, Noah's flood, the Tower of Babel, and it's written in the human genome. The Bible makes predictions. Looking at the Adam and Eve story and the biblical-based model, we can make numerous predictions. If we started with 2 people, all the people today should have a low genetic diversity. If we started with 1 million people, you're going to have a lot of genes floating around a population of 1 million strong. But if you only started with 2 people, that restricts the diversity today. Over deep time, any large population will accumulate enormous numbers of mutations, resulting in enormous amounts of genetic diversity. This is a serious problem for evolutionary theory because it is now clear that mankind has very limited genetic variation. While the observed low genetic diversity is a massive problem from the evolutionary perspective, this is most certainly expected and predicted from the biblical perspective. From the biblical model, we all come from just 2 people. This obviously means that limited diversity is easy to explain. The Bible predicted this. If the Bible is correct and Adam really is our ancestor, there should only be 1 male ancestor of humanity. The small number of mutations that separate modern men from the sequence of Y chromosome Adam indicates that this man lived in the relatively recent past. Based upon the actual observed mutation rate for the human Y chromosome, studies show that Y chromosome Adam lived just thousands of years ago, and these findings, of course, are strong evidence supporting the literal Adam of the Bible. The mitochondrial DNA is a little piece of DNA inherited exclusively from our mothers. That means we can build a family tree of all the females in the world, and there should only be 1 female ancestor of everyone on Earth today. The small number of mutations that separate modern people from the sequence of mitochondrial Eve indicates that mitochondrial Eve lived in the recent past. For evolutionists, None of these facts have to be true. All genes should also come in two versions. Since Eve was taken from Adam, she probably got Adam's genome, except for the Y chromosome, of course. These biblical predictions are all exactly what we find in modern human genetics. What's the chance of the Bible being made up and the biblical story mirrors what we actually see in human genetics today? Look at Noah's flood, for example. This story tells us that all people should be closely related. It tells us there should only be a few mitochondrial DNA lines as Shem, Ham, and Japheth's wives, and only one Y chromosome, since it's only Noah. His 3 sons would have inherited his Y chromosome. And we should have a significant evidence of rapid population growth. It turns out that this too is exactly what we find in modern genetics. This all did not have to be true. Even more predictions. The Tower of Babel account, we have found a single dispersal of all people in the relatively recent past, traveling in small people groups into uninhabited territory through the Middle East. They call it the Out of Africa story, but these are all biblical-based predictions. Welcome to SpongeBob University. Evolutionists hope, they dream, they imagine. Only the most imaginative of evolutionists are accepted. Requirements for those that believe they have the wild imaginations necessary for enrollment at SpongeBob University, just a few of them. You must believe that natural selection and mutations can explain all new innovations, structures, body plans, and novel information, which we actually know cannot actually be the result of natural selection acting upon random variation and random mutations. Evolutionists imagine these things, even though empirical evidence tells us that neo-Darwinism lacks incredible explanatory power in regards to the origin of phenotypic complexity, anatomical novelty, and the origin of non-gradual modes of transition, abrupt fossil appearance, for example. Students of SpongeBob University must also imagine that they share ancestry with apes. Grandpa, is that you? Even though all empirical evidence suggests otherwise. How much more time do I have, James?
You've got 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Awesome. Now here's what the evidence actually suggests. Human chimpanzee genetically identical by 98 to 99%, they'll say. That's based on preferential and selective treatment of data. Cherry-picked data. They use sequences they expect to be similar. What they don't include is non-aligned DNA gaps, copy number variations, and size differences. What's the actual genetic identity? It's only about 88% or lower, which is over 400 million DNA differences that actually exist between the two species. Most or nearly all of the secular research reports on human chimp DNA similarity omit significant amounts of data that do not align with each other. What is the reality? Humans are not apes, and they were created separately and uniquely in the image of God, just as the Bible tells us. Not only does the Bible prove this, but so does the DNA evidence. Y chromosome DNA disproves human evolution, for example. The extensively and remarkably different DNA sequence of the Y chromosomes between human and chimp presents a very serious problem for common ancestry. Given the low level of recombination and DNA sequence diversity on the Y chromosome, the human evolution paradigm encounters a fatal blow and a serious problem. This problem is that the human and chimp Y chromosome should be considerably more similar to each other. If human evolution was true, they should be the most similar chromosomes in the genome because they are so stable. Let's take a tour into the department of dogs, whales, and pine trees. After all, they are all eukaryotes. Embrace that R and Ra in you at SpongeBob University. This is the type of wild imaginations we at SpongeBob University are looking for. Top of the class imaginations. SpongeBob University is the perfect school for you. If you enjoy telling people that although dogs produce dogs, dogs today came from something non-dog long ago and far away. Do you believe pineapples and dogs are related to a common ancestor? If so, was that ancestor a pineapple or a dog? And did it turn into something that was non-whatever it was? If you're flabbergasted and baffled by these questions, you may have found your home at SpongeBob University, where we reward those with such wild and unscientific imaginations. Dogs produce dogs going forwards, but what about going backwards? If you believe dogs and pineapples are related, then they both at some point had to come from something non-dog and non-pineapple. By now, I hope you've all realized just how much wild imagination it takes to believe in pond scum to people evolution. Evolution imagined that time can solve all their problems. If I told you that Mary Poppins could fly quickly through the air with her umbrella, you'd say that's a fairy tale standing for truth. But if I told you Mary Poppins could fly slowly through the air with her umbrella, you'd say that's not a fairy tale. They hope They dreamed, they imagined. Look at this. Look at what they've published in Discover magazine. Discover what? How imaginative you are? Was your ancestor a sea sponge? What are we discovering here? What incredible blind faith the evolutionists have? They'll hide their science fiction-based religion under the disguise of empirical science, but we know better than that, don't we? Evolutionists are confused. Evolutionists have treated two very different phenomena, adaptation to environments and evolution of higher life forms, as if they were the same thing. Evolutionists are confused, as I've said. It doesn't take a genius to see that these are different issues. Adaptation can routinely be accomplished by loss of information. The development of higher life forms always requires a large increase in net information. Evolution is impossible. What do we know in light of the evidence? Rare beneficial mutations cannot and will not compensate for the relentless influx of deleterious mutations. As I've said before, we're going down, not up. Both evolutionists and creationists agree that natural selection happens. Natural selection will only remove the worst deleterious and detrimental mutations and will only amplify the very best beneficial mutations. What does this indicate and suggest? The accumulating damage is largely invisible and unselectable. Evolutionists have to address the key issue of net gain versus net loss. Proud graduates of SpongeBob University. For SpongeBob success stories, guys, please refer to these men for all the wild imaginative stories any SpongeBob University student could hope for. Guys, thanks so much for watching and listening to my presentation.
You bet. So, ending just in time, we are now going to switch over to the dialogue box again, and Esteban, stoked to hear your intro as well. We appreciate it. So, glad to have you here, and I will start the clock on your first word.
The topic of the day, evolution versus creation, as the best explanation for the diversity of life on Earth. Well, what do we mean when we say evolution, and what do we mean when we say creation? Well, when we say evolution, we're talking about the theory of evolution by means of natural selection, whereby we explain the diversity of life on Earth through non-random natural processes such as genetic drift and natural selection. The term evolution by itself, I think, Standing for Truth agrees on this definition, is the change in allele frequencies of a reproductive population over successive generations. And this is what we do, in fact, observe. The inference we make, based on all the lines of evidence, such as comparative genealogy, morphology, and fossil record, is that all the forms of life on Earth today derived from a common ancestor. And this, I think, is where my interlocutor disagrees most passionately, because this inference does not suppose or require any supernatural forces to occur. There was a time when we thought the universe was static and species were immutable. We found the remains of things, the likes of which were never seen alive by any human. We assumed, of course, these things no longer existed, but how do we explain their existence? My interlocutor accepts adaptation and artificial selection, and in fact, natural selection to an extent. When species adapt to their environments and when humans breed traits into a species that are desirable for human usage. So-called microevolution is when species will develop new traits. The different beaks of birds, or the different colors of a cat, the different ears of a dog, or the different sizes of a bat. But what happens when an entire population of long-beaked birds becomes isolated from the rest of the population for a long time? They can no longer interbreed with the basal population. This is what we call speciation. We agree on this point, and we call this macroevolution. But you say it's still a bird. And this is the point at which I would ask, take a 10-mile stretch of road. Paint the first inch pure red. Every inch add a little more blue, such that in the middle you have exactly half blue and half red. You make purple. And the second to last inch is 63,359 parts blue and 1 part red. And tell me at which point you would consider the road blue. Is the last inch? To our eyes, it's indistinguishable from the one before. Only when you view the whole road at once can you see the difference from beginning to end. Any 2 or 5 or 10 inches you look at will appear as just one color. This is all we propose, that the incremental changes over the many generations can and do result in vastly different organisms. And what do we mean when we say creation? When we say creation, we are talking about a single event, a supernatural, timeless, spaceless, immaterial being that willed all life, and indeed the cosmos, into existence. This is not an explanation for the diversity of life on Earth. And indeed, if it was true that we were all willed into existence by such a being in our current or close to current forms, then it wouldn't explain why we have the diversity we do, only that that was the will of this incredibly arbitrary being. And what evidence is there to support this hypothesis? Is there a library of creation event artifacts that couldn't be explained by any natural causes? No, there's a book. And how is my interlocutor going to argue for creation? Quick answer, he's not. He will only argue against the possibility of evolution, and he will do so with multiple logical fallacies. Namely, the argument from incredulity, the argument from ignorance, some of which we've already heard a little bit of, including ad hominem attacks. But underlying all of them is the reason we're here in the first place, is the false dichotomy that says either God created or evolution happened. He thinks that by disproving the theory of evolution, that his position will be automatically validated. But such is not the case. He must not only provide negative arguments against evolution, but he must provide compelling positive arguments for creation. If you make a claim, this is well known, you adopt a burden of proof. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And a creation event is most definitely an extraordinary claim. We don't propose anything beyond natural, known causes, known forces in the universe. Standing for Truth has been provided evidence for evolution over the years. And in fact, he seems to accept most of it. But where is the evidence to support his proposition? With that, I relinquish the rest of my time to the moderator.
You got it. Thanks so much, Esteban. And so, finishing as well, both debaters finishing on time, and maybe so we can add a few minutes to the Q&A. Forgot to mention regarding the Q&A, if anybody has questions, feel free to put an @ModernDayDebate in the live chat, and then say this is for X debater or Y debater, and then just let us know what your question for that debater is, and then we will compile that list and ask those questions during the Q&A at the end, which will be a blast. We've already got some great questions coming in. And in addition to that, just want to mention, I always forget this, super chats. If you do a super chat, that also would, instead of it just being a question for the question and answer, you could make a comment toward one of the debaters to which they would respond to, and then also it would basically, we automatically put them at the top of the list. So we will read them at the very start of the Q&A, and even if they come in during the Q&A, they just get put at the top of the list. So with that, I will start the clock on your first word standing for truth. And so this is where we go into those rapid rebuttals, as I mentioned. So this is just going to be the first round of rebuttals, and for this first round, it's going to be only for 4 minutes. So with that, standing for truth, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate that opening statement. I'm not looking to disprove Ponscombe to people evolution. I'm looking to replace it. And obviously, if you watch my presentation, I put forth a very strong model. Hopefully, he will address the evidence there. We're looking at low genetic diversity, one Y male ancestor, one mitochondrial DNA female ancestor, the fact that most genes come in two versions, the fact that evidence suggests that all people are closely related. We see only a few mitochondrial DNA lines, which actually makes testable and falsifiable predictions, one Y chromosomal line, and significant evidence of rapid population growth. He talked a lot about, I've got everything written down here, the definition of evolution. Yes, the word evolution can mean different things. It can simply mean a change over time, or like my opponent here said, a change in allele frequency and in populations over time or over generations. But the thing is, as I've said many times, and he used the word microevolution, that type of microevolutionary variation where we're getting the change in the frequency of the expression of different traits, as you talked about traits there. It's not, I'm not disputing that, because that type of adaptive evolution, that explains the survival of the fittest, but unfortunately it doesn't explain the arrival of the fittest. So we're looking at the small scale variation, but he needs to show us how mutations and natural selection can add new novel and meaningful information to the genome in order to explain the major innovations, the major origin events, and of course, of major new forms of life. Because the creationist model, we predict change, because species are not static, and obviously neither are their genomes, because God engineered information in compressed form into the genome that through various processes would be later decompressed and revealed as this adaptive change. And we look to the created heterozygosity hypothesis. So once again, we're obviously not opposed to change. He talked about speciation, and we're not opposed to speciation either. But the problem that he's going to have is that human mutation, because evolution is all about natural selection acting upon random variation, random mutation. But human mutation is catastrophic. And the human mutation rate nowadays is 100 mutations per person per generation. And that means our children have about 100 mutations more than we have, and our grandchildren will have 100 more mutations than they have. So on a population level, that is extremely disturbing, because if there are 100 mutations per person and there are 7 billion people on the planet, then there is 700 billion new mutations entering the human population this generation. So I want to ask my opponent here, what type of selection could eliminate so many mutations that are actually pouring into the human population? Selection that he talks about, and that I don't disagree with, but it's more consistent with a biblical-based model of death, degeneration, and decay of a once perfect creation. This selection must somehow prevent the accumulation of large numbers of minor mutations, or the species will rapidly deteriorate and fitness will decline. And even its selection, I want to see a mechanism that's going to solve this from him. He's going to have to answer this. But even if selection could keep minor mutations in check, it appears to be absolutely powerless to stop the accumulation of the most abundant class that I always talk about, and that's the nearly neutral mutation. So obviously genomes, they must eventually all degenerate in the long run, with or without selection. And we see, it's like rust on a car. It's continuous and it's destructive. And we see evidence everywhere. We see it in bacteria, we see it in viruses, we see it in ancient human populations, Homo neanderthal, Homo erectus. We see it in mammoth populations, butterfly populations. We see entropic degeneration on all levels, immunological diseases, cancers, autism's on the rise. He's going to have to explain away this problem. And if it comes down...
So sorry about that. I didn't give you a warning, but...
no problem.
So sorry. It was fast rebuttals.
Was that 4 minutes?
To be honest, I think it was a little bit over, because when I clicked back over the clock, it was at 0. So we'll give, to be fair, I want to give Esteban 5 minutes, because my guess is that's maybe what it was over. Let me know in the chat if anybody thinks it was more than that.
No problem.
And we
went by quick. It's fast paced. Let's keep her going.
It's rapid. So sorry about that. Just trying to keep up with the questions, which have been excellent questions, by the way. And let me know in the live chat, anybody, if I was wrong about that. Maybe it was more than 5 minutes. So collecting these questions is got a question from Cygart that'll be a lot of fun too. And so next, setting the clock for you, Esteban, and just to be sure that we give you like roughly equal time. Like I said, I'm technically uncertain exactly when it was, but we'll give you about 5 minutes because I think that's about what Standing for Truth had gone for. So I will start the clock on your first word. Thanks, Esteban.
4 minutes is okay.
Okay.
First of all, I see that it was pretty accurate about the shifting of the burden of proof there. He's insisted upon me explaining all these things, and I'm not necessarily a biologist, so I don't know what I'm supposed to know as far as all this mutations and stuff go. But you keep saying genetic entropy, and I don't think that means what you think it means. When you look up the term genetic entropy, the only thing you get is a book from one John C. Sanford and stuff from Answers in Genesis, which is a well-known creationist website run by Ken Ham. And sure enough, if you look up John C. Sanford, he's a creationist. Well, the fact is that entropy is not a word that we use in biology. I mean, you could technically use it for all kinds of different things, but it's a physics term that has to do with the laws of thermodynamics. I don't know if you're trying to poison the well when you throw in the word entropy to make it sound like that things are decaying and falling into chaos. I don't want to say that you're doing that on purpose, but I don't think it means what you think it means. You say that human mutation is catastrophic, like that there's 100 mutations per generation, which I've heard something very similar to that, and I'm sure you're correct about that. But the fact is that most mutations are completely neutral. And then there's such things as like duplication and recombination and all these other things that count as mutations, but that have no effect overall. But well, the point is that you still haven't provided a single bit of evidence to support your proposition. It's all evolution can't explain this, you can't explain that. It's an argument from incredulity. I don't know how this thing could possibly be, so therefore God must have created everything. How long is that?
You got about, I gave you 5 just for a cushion, so you got 1 minute and 45 seconds left.
All right, so I mean, I don't know where you're going to get this evidence from, but I suppose you have it because you're the one that supposes that there was a creation event in the first place. Sorry, I need a drink of water here.
No problem.
All right, we'll go for the next round.
You got it. All right, so thank you for that, and we will move into the next round of rebuttals. So this is also going to be rapid fire, so we're still moving at Mach speed. So this is also a 4-minute rebuttal. So I will start the timer on your first word.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I don't want to repeat all the evidence that I gave in the beginning for a literal interpretation of Genesis. If he's not going to rebut that, well, then, that's his loss. He talked about, most mutations are neutral, but of course that response misunderstands the entire point at hand. By entropy, I just mean, things are going down, not up. Things are decaying, and in a genomic level, things are decaying based on the accumulating damage, based on the accumulating low impact, near neutral, deleterious mutations. But when it comes to neutral, sure, most mutations are neutral from, say, the perspective of the organism's physical fitness, say the phenotype. But all mutations must have effect on the genetic content, right? The genotype. In no way are mutations truly neutral, and they all must have effect on the genotype, even if they only affect, say, the efficiency of transfer RNA production. So that entire comment just misunderstands the point at hand. And I've provided much evidence for this genome degradation. I can use the word degradation if he doesn't like the word entropy. But at the end of the day, H1N1 virus went from a red hot pandemic to a whimper to an extinction event in 90 years. This was the human version, of course, and this is genetic degeneration at work. We see it in bacteria. Lenski himself is demonstrating reductive evolution. Just Google reductive evolution in bacteria, it's everywhere. Reductive adaptation is, of course, consistent with a biblical-based model of death and degeneration. And in regards to Lenski's bacterial experiment, he's actually revealed reductive evolution, loss of function, loss of promoter, and loss of genes and information. So these bacteria are now lazy and handicapped. So we see genetic degeneration on all levels: animals, humans, bacteria, viruses. At the end of the day, it's irrefutable. He hasn't given any actual argument against it. And we do make predictions based on the created heterozygosity hypothesis that I talked about. Obviously, God's command to be fruitful and multiply wouldn't have been carried out by cloning. So at the end of the day, we hypothesize that, God created Adam and Eve and the created kinds with pre-existing functional DNA differences. This is created heterozygosity. So we make a prediction based on this hypothesis that most non-coding DNA will be functional, and we're already seeing this with the accumulating papers suggesting function. We also predict that differences in mitochondrial DNA sequences between families are expected to reflect functional differences and not just be due to neutral mutations. So this is going to help us identify the barrier and the created kinds, what's related and what's not actually related through ancestry. And measured mitochondrial DNA mutation rates and known mitochondrial DNA differences within families are expected to fit the creation timescale, assuming a constant mutation rate and created kind started with no mitochondrial DNA mutation. So I want to see his testable predictions. I want to see what he's predicting based on what we know about genomics, because everything we're predicting is coming true. How much more time do I have there, James?
You have 47 seconds.
Awesome. He talked about recombination, of course, and the thing is, if you look to linkage groups, there's little to no recombination going on. So at the end of the day, that's not going to help the problem, because things are, as I've said before, only getting worse. These linkage groups are degenerating more. So if you throw in one or two beneficials, say, and he still hasn't given me a beneficial mutation that's not actually deleterious on any level to take his fish to fishermen, they're just going to get neutralized by the large numbers of deleterious mutations. So that linkage group, based on the recombination, is actually a killer and a destroyer for evolution. So he's going to have to give us a reason and evidence for believing that whales, pine trees, bacteria, and carrots are actually related through common ancestry. Thanks a lot, James.
Sorry, it's hard to give you the warnings as it's so rapid pace. So, but next, I will start the timer for the second rebuttal from Esteban, or A Posteriori Unum. So the floor is yours, Esteban.
Hold on, just give me a second.
No problem.
Okay. I'm not a geneticist or even a biologist, and I'm sure he has some pretty good points. But it doesn't help to prove creation to disprove evolution. I believe I mentioned that in the opening. So we could say that evolution says this, and this thing kind of looks weird when you look at it or whatever. But the one thing that does have that we do observe is that there are changes, and like I said, he agrees. There are changes in populations over time, and whether or not we're headed towards a complete genetic destruction, or eventually maybe in 1,000 years we're gonna cease to be able to reproduce, is irrelevant to whether or not what we observe is what we observe. And I mean, we observe things like what's it called, the lungfish, where it's kind of like halfway coming out of the water and he could breathe air and stuff like that. That kind of thing points towards evolution, common ancestor. The fossil record points towards a common ancestor. When you look at things like Archaeopteryx and Microraptor, when you see the feathers and the teeth and the scales, and what we don't see is evidence of magic, of creation, of things spontaneously coming into existence. The theory of evolution only proposes that this stuff was already here, and that through very small changes can, over time, produce very big changes. I don't think it's that difficult to imagine this, and that's why I say that it's more like an argument from incredulity, where you can't wrap your head around how this could be. Like, how could a fish get out of the water and start walking around? And, well, we don't say that.
Got 1 minute left.
Thank you. And again, we don't, and even some of the so-called predictions that he said that they make based on creation. I mean, where are you getting these predictions from? Are they in the Bible? I've not read that part. All it says is that God created this, God created that. Like, I Dream of Jeannie. It doesn't say that that anything is going to degenerate or any of that kind of stuff. They didn't know about genetics back then. I don't know how you can even come back from that one.
10 seconds.
Or not come back from that one, but from how you can overcome that obstacle.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that rebuttal, and then we will move over into the third round of rebuttals. Do I have that right? Forgive me, I think that's right. So it's a lot of rebuttals. It is the third round of rebuttals. This is a 3-minute rebuttal, so like I said, rapid speed. So with that, standing for truth, I will start the timer on your first word, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. He shouldn't be too hard on himself. The evidence that I usually provide based on a literal interpretation of Genesis, people can't really address. There's a surprising lack of diversity, as I said, among people worldwide, and that's the reason why evolutionists have to resort to the rescue device of a population bottleneck in evolutionary models. And the Bible directly predicts one male and one female ancestor, and we see that to be true. And the Bible predicts little diversity, as I've talked about, and the Bible directly predicts one dispersal of humanity across the whole earth. So these evidence and the testable predictions that flow from it are all based on a literal interpretation of Genesis. And the thing is, the outcome of these predictions, especially in regards to the created heterozygosity hypothesis, actually not only prove biblical creation, but they demolish pawns coming to people evolution all at the same time. Phylogenetic systematics, for example, which evolutionists such as R. and Rowell say is the best evidence for Goodyear evolution. But the thing is, the whole thing is mostly based on a concept of outdated junk DNA. And DNA functions are only beginning to be found during the last decade. And what that means is we understand less than 5% of the DNA language based on the gold standard of gene functional testing, which is obviously gene knockout test. But of course, gene knockout tests on humans is unethical. And the trajectory that we see here strongly suggests that the vast majority of DNA will be functional. And this takes away the primary assumption, one of the primary assumptions of evolutionary phylogenetics. So that's, as I said, mostly based on mutations and pseudogenes. So obviously, if the vast majority of DNA is functional, it now becomes a common design argument as creationists have always predicted. And it obviously is a failed prediction by the evolutionists. And we predicted the vast majority of DNA is functional. So evolution has to deal with so many problems. And he talks about magic. Well, evolutionists are the ones invoking magic, say convergent evolution, for example. He brings up fossils here as evidence. But the thing is, they cite this circumstantial evidence of, say, fossils. As I pointed out in my opening, the fossils that we actually find is more consistent with a biblical-based model and a Bible starting point, because in regards to evolutionary theory, these transitional forms, being proof of common descent, it's just circumstantial evidence because it doesn't even have a theory to cling to. And these apparent progressions, of course, are predicated on the assumption of common descent. And he talks about some of the changes that we see, but in light of the built-in capacity of animals to adapt independently based on created genetic diversity, to say different environmental conditions, obviously in a way, say, to the finches that diverge from a single parental stock. Actually, one of the predictions that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has put forth in replacing Darwin is already coming true, because we see in these.
So sorry to.
Okay, no problem. I'll continue after.
Let's see. I don't know exactly what that was, so we'll give an extra minute, because again, I went to the clock and when I went, it was 0 seconds. So sorry. Never tried this rapid fire, so we'll give you 4 minutes just to be safe, because I don't think it was over 4 minutes. For Esteban.
That was very fast.
So thank you so much, Esteban, and the floor is yours. I'm starting the clock on your first word with 4 minutes.
Again, you spoke about degeneration, and you said it says that in the Bible. I don't quite remember that part. Maybe you can quote that for me. But again, that we're supposing, and the reason why I said that it's possible that you were poisoning the well with the word entropy, and I appreciate that you're no longer using it, but is because entropy supposes that you're talking about a closed system. I know you're not talking about thermodynamics, but you're talking about life forms as if they were closed systems, but we're not. We're not closed systems whatsoever, and there are ways to overcome all this degeneration. There's new information. There's the recombinations and well, I can't think of the word. It doesn't matter. It's one of those things. But the fact is, you can't tell me what the different kinds are. What are the different kinds that God created? Via magic, that there's some sort of a barrier where they can't become something else millions of years in the future or thousands of years in the future. Whatever you believe. I suppose you believe the Earth is about 6,000 to 10,000 years old or something like that. But what are these kinds, and what is it that actually prevents one kind from becoming another? Because we know that a dog produces a dog, like you said, a bird produces a bird. Nobody ever said differently. It's just a time scale difference. But what kind of barrier is there it's like the colors. The reason why I mentioned the colored road from red to blue, at what point would you put, would you draw the line between red and blue? The changes are so small over such a long distance, or in this case, we're talking about time, that any two or even 10 next to each other, they all look the same. or at least they're indistinguishable to the human eye in that context.
Got about 1 minute left.
1 minute. You mentioned that all right, no, I'll relinquish the rest of this one.
You got it. And with that, we will next move into the third rebuttal round. So these are 3 minutes each, so I will keep my eyes on the clock the entire time, and I will catch up with any questions that come in immediately after. So the floor is yours, Standing for Truth.
Is this the closing or just another rebuttal?
This is the final rebuttal before the closing, so 3 minutes.
Before the closing. Okay, awesome. Yeah, as I was saying before, we've seen these finch populations now go from shifts from homozygosity to heterozygosity to homozygosity, producing new species quickly. He talks about what are the original created kinds, what are the barriers. Well, we can look at something like orphan genes, which are taxonomically restricted genes that can point us to what's related and what's not. We can look at breeding tests. And of course, based on the hypothesis of created heterozygosity, we're going to look at functionally unique differences, DNA differences that are across families. Because if we're going to look to the family level as the original created kind, we're going to have to see what testable predictions actually flow from it. So in regards to the actual limits, the actual barrier, well, we can see in actual breeding tests, we can see that lions and leopards can produce offspring. That would indicate they must be of the same biblical kind. We can see with horses, we can see zorses, zonkies, zianis, shebras. So through breeding tests, we can see what's related and what's not in the biblical based model. And even squirrels, we can see there's 200 species of squirrels. I think there's 8 species of bear. So what's the barrier? I would say the barrier is bear. And you know what? Just because we can't always identify the exact line or barrier of these kinds, that doesn't prove in any way that bacteria, fish, whales, and pine trees are actually related through common ancestry. And the fact that genomes are devolving and the genome is rusting out like a car makes it impossible for your fish to take your fish to fishermen, because like I said, let's take a room full of people, for example, kill off the most 1 minute, kill off the most mutant people. Now we have a room half full of people who still have approximately 100 more mutations than their parents. And if everybody is multiply mutant, and if every generation is more mutant than the one before it, which we know is true based on the amount of mutations being transmitted to our children, all selection can do is slow down the degeneration process by killing off the absolute worst of the lot. But it doesn't stop mutations from accumulating in the population over time. So things are going down, not up. And all modern scientific evidence points to the decay and destruction of an originally perfect design creation. He still hasn't addressed the evidence that I provided in the beginning, and he hasn't provided any real mechanisms or evidence to stop this genetic degeneration. I don't want to see an example of a beneficial mutation that actually adds new, novel, and meaningful information to the genome, because due to the influx of deleterious mutations, the rare occurrence of 1 or 2 beneficial mutations cannot counterbalance the influx of deleterious mutations. It can't counterbalance the information loss. So thank you.
You bet. So with that, we will now move into the final rebuttal statement. So that's going to be from Esteban, and that's going to be 3 minutes as well. So Esteban, the floor is yours.
Well, I haven't acknowledged your evidence because you haven't provided any. The only thing you've done, as I predicted from the very beginning, is you made negative arguments against evolution. You've mentioned deleterious mutations and degeneration of the genome of different things, and you mentioned that lions and leopards can breed and therefore they're the same kind somehow, whatever that means. And you mentioned a whole slew of different things, but you haven't provided any actual evidence. And maybe I should define evidence. Evidence is something that it's a piece of information that you gather that points towards one proposition over any other proposition that can only be interpreted in one way. And it's not something that like if you see the sun rise, that could mean that the sun moves around the earth, or it could mean that the earth is rotating. So it's not really evidence for either. You need not evidence against evolution, which is, but you need evidence for creation.
Got a minute
I
left.
would actually start, if I were you, with maybe proving that your God exists in the first place. Because the thing about evolution is that we don't have that assumption. We have the assumption that the world exists and that animals and organisms exist and that they reproduce.
30 seconds left.
And that they reproduce and they have changes and in each generation, and these changes can accumulate over time. We don't need anything supernatural to explain what we see in the world today. How much time?
Got 10 seconds left.
All right, well, you can have it.
You got it. And for our next period, this is just our closings before we move into the Q&A. So these are also short and sweet, only 4 minutes apiece. So with that, standing for truth, I'll start the clock on your first word.
Awesome. Well, as usual, none of the actual evidence was presented. He said I didn't present any of it, but obviously go back and look into it. He hasn't even addressed all the evidence of genomic degeneration I presented. There's a pandemic, entropic degeneration on all levels, epigenetic degeneration as well. Neanderthal was highly inbred at a very high genetic load. The hobbits, Homo floresiensis was very highly inbred and appeared to suffer from reductive evolution, and that resulted in the reduced body size, reduced brain volume, and in other various pathologies. Mammoth populations were highly inbred and carried an elevated genetic load. Bacteria, we see reductive evolution there. We see it in viruses. We see it in cheetah populations. I mean, I don't want to just re-say everything, but we see genomic degeneration. Everyone compensating for loss of information is not possible. We see the predictions flowing from created heterozygosity coming true. We know overall that the non-coding regions of DNA function much like an operating system in a computer that's directing the timing, expression, and regulation and use of the other information or the data files that code for proteins. And these regions, they're regulating, DNA replication, transcription, marked sites for program rearrangements of genetic material, even regulates embryological and placental development and aids in immunodefense. Even these ERVs, these endogenous retroviruses and pseudogenes are all showing functions, very important functions. And he talked about fossils, but at the end of the day, when we look at the geology, there's evidence that the earth was once underwater. We see marine fossils on mountains and in landlocked areas far from the sea, some sedimentary rock layers extend over entire continents or even farther. The deposition of those layers must have been catastrophic, or there would not have been much fossilization. So the existence of fossils alone proves biblical creation and the Genesis flood. I mean, how many animals died today? How many fossilized? And there's fossils of animals giving birth, of fish being eaten, suggesting sudden and rapid burial. So all these observations we see are in accord with the flood of Noah, a biblical-based model that talks about the earth being, covered in water just a few thousand years ago. So the existence, as I said, of a fossil is proof that it happened quickly, because environmental factors prevent that organism from forming. But if it's covered by sediment and then protected, the fossilization process can actually start. And we can see that in real-time evidence in Mount St. Helens, because rapidly formed sedimentary layers and canyons were seen at Mount St. Helens. And the scope and scale of the energy produced by the flood, I have realized that evolutionists underestimate, because it's amazing. The fountains of the great deep break open. The earth is fractured like an eggshell. Continents are moving vertically, horizontally. The tsunamis drive floodwaters onto the continents. Rain unending, geologic catastrophes, and the continents are moving at rapid paces through the floodwaters. And he talks about evidence. Well, the pre-flood ocean crust is dragged down into the mantle core. That's called subduction process. And there's a testable prediction that comes from this, because the cold ocean crust should still be cold, since this occurred only thousands of years ago, even though it has descended into the deep hot mantle. Seismic data now from NASA has revealed enormous slabs of cool rock under North America, down in the core itself, which should be warm. More confirmation of flood geology. We see it in genetics, we see it in geology, we see it everywhere, and even rapid magnetic reversals, also confirmation of this flood. Contorted rocks, for example, indicate fast folding of soft sediments, and much geologic evidence suggests rapid plate tectonics. And the global flood and the vast and unique consequences of it easily explain coal, oil. They're obviously not due to millions of years. In fact, they're formed in months. The Grand Canyon did not form in millions of years. It formed in weeks. Okay, thanks so much, James.
Sorry to do that. It's just like rapid fire. So with that, resetting the clock for the 4-minute from closing from Esteban. And we are going to take questions for about literally another 60 seconds, because we've got a ton that have come in. They're great questions. I love the questions, but we also have a triple header in a way. Right after this debate, we're actually having Sentinel Apologetics. Robert is going to be debating Nephilim Free on whether or not Genesis actually teaches a young Earth creation. So pretty relevant to this debate. So it's right after. So I want to try to be really quick. So jumping into your closing statement, Esteban, I'll start the clock on your first word.
Well, standing for truth, I do appreciate your enthusiasm. And I appreciate the fact that you do think that you did provide some evidence for a creation event. But if you did, I haven't heard it, because the only thing you did was literally try to disprove evolution. But I would even say that, what if we assumed that evolution wasn't true? Can you then provide anything that points to an actual creation event? I mean, it's the reason why I say it's a false dichotomy is because evolution could absolutely occur with a creation event. God could have created the mechanism by which we evolve. And so there's a third option right there. So any kind of negative evidence, and even if I grant you every single point that all these deleterious mutations are adding up and that we're going to fail, and none of this means that creation is the thing. It because this is creation versus evolution. It's not just, is evolution a thing? I don't know if you remember that part of it, but you do actually have to provide some evidence. Now, I mean, I haven't sat here and showed you the fossil record, but I know that you're pretty educated as far as you do acknowledge natural selection, you acknowledge microevolution, and actually you do acknowledge macroevolution, because you do realize that species do become new species and that they cannot interbreed with, like, for example, ring species. The A can breed with B, and B can breed with C, and C with D, but not D with A. And you acknowledge that, but at the same time, uh, you try to I'm sorry. I guess what I'm saying is that in order for one to believe that that magic was what brought the earth and all of its inhabitants upon the earth, one would have to show that magic is a thing rather than nothing but natural processes.
50 seconds.
Because as far as I have ever seen in my entire life, the only thing we do have is natural processes. That's the only things we can agree on. And I believe we are in agreement with 90% of all these things. We all know that sexual reproduction occurs, and that the next generation does not inherit 100% of the genes of either parent, and that things change over time. And I think you're just getting hung up because of a lack of imagination, or maybe it's because of too much imagination. Because
5 seconds
books
left.
and fairy tales are full of imagination.
Gotcha. So we next will go into the question and answer. So thanks so much for your questions. They're great. Sorry we had to close the Q&A. We closed it a few minutes ago. We probably won't get to all the questions, but we're going to try. We're going to go as fast as we can. And with that, so first, super chats. Jamie Russell, thanks so much for your super chat. I didn't see a question attached to it, but we appreciate it if it was just meant to be a gift to the channel. So thanks for your support. If you have that question and you want to attach it, my first super chat, I know that sometimes I still do it, even past my first one. I forget to put the message in. So Ronald Madanka, thanks for your super chat. He said, for Standing for Truth, why do you think Francis Collins, Tim Keller, John Walton, and N.T. Wright, C.S. Lewis, and others accept evolution?
I would say because they've unfortunately been influenced by naturalism, secularism, obviously the evolutionary community. Maybe they're intimidated. I'm not too sure, but all evidence is pointing to obviously a literal interpretation of Genesis. And I would just direct people to probably the best thorough debate on this would be Dr. Dennis Venema from BioLogos versus Dr. Nathaniel Jensen from Answers in Genesis, where he goes in depth into these predictions on mitochondrial DNA, the predictions that flow from the LMN haplogroups, and the testable predictions that flow from the created heterozygosity hypothesis. So you'll see Francis Collins, he headed the Human Genome Project, I think it was. He also founded BioLogos. So you can see the panic that's coming from their side. I'd recommend go and watch that debate and see for yourself how strong the biblical model is. Thanks so much.
Right, we'll move to the next one. And then if you are Kent Hovind, CPA, your arch nemesis is here. It's not Kent Hovind's real accountant, if anybody doesn't know that already. He says, thanks for your super chat. We appreciate that. And he says, preachers talking about science is hilarious. So if you want to respond to that, Standing for Truth, my guess it's for you, as long as you're short and pithy.
What was it? What did he say?
He said, preachers talking about science is hilarious, with a capital H.
Yeah, I don't know. Have him come on and debate me and see if he can address any of my arguments. That's all I got to say.
Ooh, that's all right. So short and pithy indeed. Thanks so much for your super chats. Totally appreciate it. Landon Freeman asks, how do you explain the sudden appearance of biological features in the fossil record, followed by rapid diversification, as was the case with insects and their wings? And yes, I do have secular source for my claim. So my guess, I don't know a lot about this material, but I think that's probably for a posteriori unum.
How do I explain what?
So he asked, how do you explain the sudden appearance of biological features in the fossil record, followed by rapid diversification, as was the case with insects and their wings?
Sounds like punctuated equilibrium. I mean, I don't know, unless you have like a specific case. I don't know how to address like the sudden appearance of something. I mean, it wouldn't be sudden anyway. It would be over the course of millions of years, but we only get small windows, small little glimpses into what happened in the past. You know, we might have a fossil from year X, and won't have another one for another another million years, and we have to put the pieces together.
You got it. Thanks very much. And Snake was right. Thanks for your super chat. Totally appreciate it. He asks, how can you claim to make a predictions when you can't tell created kinds from evolved kinds? So I think that's for, it says for standing for truth.
Well, for one, created kinds, I've already talked about how we can identify those through breeding tests. We can even look at orphan genes, which I talked about as taxonomically restricted genes that actually confirm that there is limited ancestry, because not everything can be related, because the thing is, orphan genes, what they are is they're fully functional gene sequences that code for both a functional messenger RNA and a protein, and they lack similar counterparts in other organisms. So here's a way that we can debunk universal common ancestry, because for example, and I'll finish off here, because the orphan genes that are, say, specific to humans are actually powerful evidence against the idea that we evolved from apes. And the reason why that is because these genes appear fully formed, uniquely integrated into the complexity of the human genomic network, and clearly functional and important to various cellular processes. Plus, we're still making further discoveries on DNA and the non-coding regions. So the more we understand the DNA language, the more we'll understand what's related and what's not. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. And next up, Richard Madsen asks, if Adam consumed of knowledge of good and evil, then why does God preach to Cain about good and evil after he makes a poor sacrificial offering? Did Adam not tell Cain? I think he's saying, like, did Adam not tell Cain about, like, the difference from right from wrong?
So when Adam fell, or ate from the apple, he was given knowledge of obviously good and evil. And Cain, why didn't Adam tell Cain? Well, that's a pretty deep theological question. I'll have to think more about that one. Thanks, James.
You got it. And Sank was right. Thanks for your super chat. Just came in, and he said, humans have no orphan genes because we know all homologs. That's homologs, I think so. HOMOLOGS.
See, the thing is, evolutionists have to resort to, I think it's called de novo gene synthesis. I'd have to look that up for sure as a rescue device. It's circular, so there's an existence of orphan genes. Therefore, there has to be an explanation for it, because there exists something called orphan genes. But the thing is, this amazing category of genes are taxonomically restricted genes, as I said, and they're unique to each type of organism. They appear suddenly without any trace of ancestry in apes or any other animal. So the point is, it's the evolutionist problem, because it doesn't fit the hypothetical fairy tale of evolutionary theory. And I think my opponent here summed it up perfectly at the end in his conclusion. He says, I don't have enough imagination. And he's right. I don't have enough imagination to believe that pine trees and whales are related through common ancestry, when all we see is death, decay, and degeneration of a once perfect creation. So thanks, James.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And next question. So next one is, thanks for that, by the way, alias fake name asks, what unit of measurement does Standing for Truth use to quantify quote-unquote information loss versus gain?
Well, we can see through deletions. We can see through, like for example, Lenski's E. coli experiment. We can actually see that the functional genome itself has shrank, and they've gotten rid of genes short term. But what it is it's long term degeneration. So if I'm not sure if he's looking for an exact definition of information or the. I mean, that's all I got for him right now at this point.
You got it. And Snake was right, actually has a response to what you just said. He says, no, we found homologs. They're not de novo anymore.
The thing is, there's multiple rescue devices explanations for what we know to be orphan genes, but at the end of the day, they are evidently part of the genomic landscape, which is indicative of each created kind. But like I said, the evolutionists are the ones that are scattering themselves for explanation, because we look at the orphan genes as proof positive for created kinds, but at the end of the day, we only understand less than 5% of the DNA language, and the more we do functional tests, the more we'll figure out, like I said before, what's related and what's not. But there's plenty of evidence for limited ancestry versus universal ancestry. If anybody wants to watch Snake and I's debates, we've had about 5. Go check them out; they were fun, and maybe we can do another one where we can go back and forth on this one too. Thanks, James.
You got it. So thanks for that. And next up, we have Richard Madsen asked question: environmental pressures select for adaptation. Does it not select against traits? Can we get a husky breeder to breed wolf from their stock? Is the genetic material still there?
A lot of it has to do with the loss of information. For example, you could take 2 wolves and pretty much breed any type of domestic dog that there is artificially, but it's going to be really difficult to take 2 Chihuahuas, because the limited allelic potential and the limited allelic variability is so limited and lost compared to, say, 2 wolves. So you can see change based on loss of traits, loss of information. But the funny thing is, pawns come to people, evolution needs a gain in novel information. So if all you see is losses of information, degeneration of information, that's not going to take your amoeba to whale. It's just not possible. It's falsified.
Gotcha. And I'm so sorry, Esteban, that most of the questions are going to Standing for Truth. But I'll try to see if we got any, so you can get some action too in the Q&A. And then Neil Stone though asks, they're coming for you, Standing. He says, I want to know if he could explain why some humans are born with tails if we didn't in fact evolve from an ape-like ancestor, monkey, whatever you want to call it. I know there's that phrase has a lot of controversy, but go ahead.
Well, when we if we looked at something like vestigial organs, for example, let's say the coccyx, the appendix, there used to list, I think, over 100 of them. Now, through further scientific advancement, we know that there's important functions for every single one of them. A big one is whale hind legs, which is not vestigial at all. It's very much important in sexual reproduction. But these tails that he's talking about, they actually don't have the functionality as a real tail. I think I'd have to look it up to be 100% sure, but it's mostly just like a fleshly growth. So it's just an abnormality. So it has nothing to do with the tails he's thinking of to link us to chimpanzees. And so yeah, that's just a fallacy right there. That's not evidence for human to ape ancestry.
If I could just say something, the term is called atavism. It's not a vestigial organ. It's something that comes up that we already have in our right. Gene that comes up.
It's like a growth of fatty tissue, isn't it?
Well, yeah, when it comes into humans, but it's an atavism. It's something that we have in our genetic information, but it doesn't usually come up. And but every once in a while it does come up.
Right.
It's like.
Right, but from my understanding, it has nothing to do with a tail that an animal would have, say like a monkey. It's just an abnormality. It's a fleshly growth that I think they surgically remove it or whatever it is, but it doesn't have anything to do with the tail that he's referring to, from my understanding. I have to look more into it.
Okay, so sorry to move so fast. Just want to, forgive me if I mispronounce this. Ilhan Omar, thanks for your super chat. Totally appreciate it. They ask, what you think about, I'm quoting it verbatim, what you think about Fodor and Rosenberg's arguments that natural selection isn't explanatory or predictive and thus useless for explaining design. Just in case anybody doesn't know the context, Fodor and Rosenberg are philosophers, and Rosenberg, I know for sure, is an atheist. I think Fodor is too, and that is what they're asking. I don't know if it's. I think it would be toward one of the debaters, but it's something that, unless you're familiar with the philosophy of science, it's pretty hard to know. I don't know. I think we have a buzzsaw in philosophy who came in. So if you guys want to answer it, you can. I'm trying to give the context.
Esteban can go ahead if he wants.
I don't know the arguments of either one of those people. I really can't speak on it if I don't know the argument.
No problem.
I would love to.
No problem. That's all right. You got it. Somebody loves philosophy, so I appreciate the question. Great question. Really interesting. And then moving forward, thanks for that super chat. Neil Stone asks, or Cy Gart asks, are you suggesting that we are less fit than people living 1,000 years ago? So I think that's for Standing for Truth.
I would say that, well, you can look at certain populations of humans, say, early populations of Neanderthal. They were 40% less fit than modern humans, and that severe genetic degeneration probably contributed to the disappearance of that population. We see it in the hobbits. We know they experienced high genetic load. Homo naledi looked like they were likewise inbred and suffered from this reductive evolution. Homo erectus as well. What we see is a dispersion at Babel and a lot of these subgroups that were isolated and inbred. The genetic load, the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes were revealed, and it led to a more fast pace genetic entropy versus what we're seeing now. But we're still heading to degeneration. So 1,000 years ago, I would say humans are more or less fit now. And we can see specific examples as well from early human populations. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. And we're just going to do maybe a couple more questions really quick. Robert let me know that he'll be about 10 minutes late, so we can go just a little bit later for the next debate will start maybe just 5 to 10 minutes late. So we'll just quick get these last.
And maybe just one or two more questions there, James. Go ahead, brother.
Agreed. Okay. Patrick Smith, thanks for your question. He asks for a posteriori unum. Sorry, there you go. Get some action. He said, what is the predicted next jump in evolution? Will we expect a better healing factor or higher intelligence or greater strength?
The next predicted jump in human evolution is that we will be different. There's no better or worse or fitter or less fit. It's just we will be different. And depending on what the environmental factors are, let's suppose we all moved into the Arctic now, we might be selected for having longer hair, fur all over our bodies. But it really depends on the environment that we live in.
You got it. Thanks. And then last question. Thanks so much. Praise I am that I am asks, can evolutionary fitness allow a weight lifer to eventually lift a 100,000 pounds? Wouldn't that falsify progressive gains in evolution? Not sure who that's even for. It's a tough one. So I'll read it one more time.
Well,
hopefully one of you guys can let me know who you think it's for.
Well, I think I can, because I think he might have to do with barriers, because I know Esteban talked about barriers, right? Can you get, for example, can you get a dog as big as an elephant? We know there's animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant, or as small as a flea. There's insects as small as a flea. So we can see limits there, and I think Praise's question has to do with certain limits, whether it's, I think his question was based more on a physical limit or a genomic limit, but I think clearly we see there are limits.
Gotcha.
I'd say based on physics, there are.
You got it. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all those great questions. I wish we could go through all of them. Forgive me about that. However, a lot of the questions might be related, and frankly, you could even, a lot of these you might be able to just ask in the next one because the topics are similar, though the next one will be, does Genesis suggest that young earth creation is the best interpretation? So that will have Robert from Sentinel Apologetics and Nephilim Free. You could say, I always say, the debate world's past, Nephilim Free versus the debate world's future, Sentinel Apologetics. That will be a very exciting one. And so with that, thanks for being here, everybody. We hope you have a great night. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Their links, the speakers, are in the description, and I highly encourage you to check them out. That way, even if you don't agree, if you're like, oh, that standing for truth is back, like, or, you know, you could say, well, I can at least get his case straight from him. And so if you want to give a rebuttal, then you can say, hey, I read your stuff straight from you. And so likewise, Christians, to check out a Posteriori Unum, he has his Twitter link down below, and that way you can at least say that you'd read the other side. So I think that's kind of as you get more advanced, that's the goal. So with that, thanks for being here, everybody, and keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable, and thanks to the debaters for coming on.
Just when you thought 2019 couldn't get any better for debates, we've got creation versus evolution. Dr. Kent Hovind debates a posteriori Unum on Tuesday, September 17th at 4 p.m. EST. A posteriori Unum is no stranger to debates. You've seen him on the Non Sequitur Show debating Nephilim Free. You've seen him on Modern Day Debate debating Standing for Truth. But this time, he goes up against the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Kent Hovind. Be there, because it's gonna be a wild one. Hey everybody, it's Standing for Truth, and here it is, the much anticipated debate between Dr. Kent Hovind and a posteriori Unum. What's the best explanation for the diversity of life? Creation or evolution? Enjoy. For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button, because we are just getting started.
Okay, hey guys, we're here again. Thank you so much. This one is going to be a blast. I'm really excited. I want to thank Dr. Hovind for joining us, as well as Esteban here, who goes by a posteriori Unum. Tough one to say. I hope I said it right. So we'll get right into it. We've got a formal debate. We'll have opening statements, rebuttals, a short discussion, and a short closing with some Q&A. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to the evolutionist, who would be Esteban, who can start off with his opening statement.
Yes, hello. First, before I begin, I'd like to thank I Am That I Am for hosting, Standing for Truth for setting this all up and moderating, and for Kent Hovind for taking the time out of his day and agreeing to do this after a couple of failed attempts a few months ago to have a debate on the Non Sequitur Show. I also want to thank Standing for Truth for an awesome trailer. You definitely flattered me quite a bit, and I'm thrilled that you found a picture of me at this year's Ark Encounter protest with Aaron Ra. It was a pretty special day. Anyway, about me, I am a posteriori Unum, but since that is a mouthful, everyone can call me Esteban. That's my pseudonym for all online interactions. I'm an atheist and very interested in science and philosophy, and I try to be an honest interlocutor. And I'm always glad to be given the opportunity to spread a little bit of skepticism and rationality. Uh, that being said, I'll start by clarifying that despite the fact that I'm not a biologist, my goal today is to show that biology overwhelmingly supports evolution as the best explanation for the diversity of life on Earth. And I intend to illustrate that all the evidence we have available shows that living things as we see them now did in fact evolve from a common ancestor and were not created by some sort of god or universe creating pixies. Uh, and I'm sure uh, you are, you, Mr. Hovind, are very familiar with at least the word, the law of monophily, that states that no organism can outgrow its heritage. You say that we evolutionists say that, for example, a dog produces a non dog, when you know and I know that we do not say that at all. It is quite the opposite. This is a straw man of evolution that has been pointed out and corrected a great many times. That I think that it couldn't just be a mere misunderstanding or the result of ignorance of the facts, but that it's a bald face and shameless misrepresentation that it that you repeat over and over and over. But what I would like to address all the straw men in the room that you repeatedly claim that we evolutionists believe that we came from a rock or something of that sort, a soup, depending on your mood, I suppose. But not one person, not one evolutionist ever uh, that I'm aware of has ever said anything even remotely close to that. Uh, and the irony to that is that you literally do believe that humans were created using clay via an incantation spell, which I think is hilarious. You claim that there are 6 different types of evolution. You know this isn't true and it never has been true. There is one scientific theory that explains the biodiversity of Earth, of life on Earth. All the other things you say are part of evolution have absolutely nothing to do with biology. The Big Bang, stellar formation, planetary formations, etc. But I am not correcting you here. You've been corrected already. I'm just pointing out all these straw men and uh, all the misrepresentations of what evolution actually is. Uh, you might point out that I'm addressing arguments that you made in the past and that not what you said here today. Well, to be fair, you haven't said anything here today. So, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you do you do use these arguments. You have used them in the past, and if you say that you no longer hold that point of view or whatever, then feel free to correct me on any of those that uh, any of the straw men that you no longer make. Sorry. And then I'd like to talk about this idea of evolutionism. It seems that you want to say that belief in evolution is religion, and being so, you're implying that it's somehow false, that we believe in it without evidence, which, I mean, that means we would pretty much be on the same page there, because if it were a religion, I would say, yeah, it's probably false, and it's probably believed based on no evidence. But what else is a religion? Creationism, Christianity. So by that chain of logic there, if I were to concede that it is somehow a religion, despite not fitting the definition of religion in any way whatsoever, then your creationism would fare none the better. One of the major concerns that a lot of creationists have is that they think evolution, should it be true, threatens the idea of God, and that it contradicts what the Bible says, which of course it does, but it doesn't contradict in such a way that it creates this dichotomy that it's either life evolved or a God exists. And you know that.
Oh,
What's
Praise!
happening?
It looks like you. It looks like you've got your noise in the background there, Praise.
Oh, so you guys can hear that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I stopped your timer for that there, Esteban, so continue on.
Yeah. I just gotta get back on track. It creates this dichotomy that either life evolved or that a God exists, but when in fact you know that the vast majority of even Christians do accept evolution as the best explanation. Though it is not a dichotomy, there could easily be a God that put in place the mechanisms by which evolution happens, and it's totally reconciled. But I don't believe that either. How much time do I have? Or how much time was that?
I think you're at about 7 minutes or so, so you got a couple more minutes.
All right. And there is no other approach to learning about the natural world besides science. It tells a beautiful story about thousands of people actually trying to learn and experimenting and overcoming great obstacles and limitations. It gives us a window into the past, helps us understand the present, and even predict the future. And its fossils are some exceptional windows into the past that have great stories to tell. It's unfortunate that all the amazing insights that they can give us are lost on creationists because they have to be ignored lest Mr. Creationist hear the words millions or billions of years. And conversely, the Bible is a collection of stories written by people who did not understand the world around them. Unlike science, it does not change and it does not improve. The authors couldn't even begin to imagine the complexity of life and other natural processes on Earth. It is precisely the fact that it doesn't change that it's just no good. We can't learn anything from it. And that's all I have to say for the introduction.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that introduction there. That was in between 9 and 10 minutes. So therefore, Dr. Hovind, you get equal time. And whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much. My name is Ken Hovind. I taught high school science and math 15 years in Christian schools and now travel and speak on the subject of creation versus evolutionism. And it is certainly an ism along with the lines of communism, Nazism, socialism, and Marxism, in my humble, totally unbiased opinion. Unum, the united, everybody agrees. Posteriori is the name you've chosen, which means related or derived by reasoning, observed facts. I guess I'd be curious, have there been any observed facts where any dog has ever produced a non-dog, or cat produced a non-cat, or cow come from a non-cow? Has any farmer in the history of the world ever observed these facts, or is this something you believe? It is your religion. I didn't know much about you, Esteban, and I see you have two pseudonyms. You don't ever give your real name. I don't know why you don't do that. My name is Kent Hovind. Okay, here you are with Mr. Nelson at some kind of rally there, and a couple of other folks who claim to be atheists. Let's see, Proverbs 13. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. You claim you're going to, what's this first word here, Esteban? Something under religion, something we can find a cure. What's that word on your T-shirt? Go ahead and interrupt me here.
Together
we can find a cure. Good. Hey, I will work with you on finding the cure for evolutionism. It is a religious belief. It is an evil religious belief. Let's work together and find a cure. Okay, my position is very simple. God made the entire world in 6 days about 6,000 years ago. If that's, I think all the scientific evidence points to that. I think that's the only way it works biologically. In biology, certain animals have to have each other to survive. There's thousands of relationships where they have to have each other, symbiotic relationships. You have it between plants and plants, between plants and animals, between animals and animals. I don't think it's possible to give a definition of a system that'll work without everything being created in 6 days. The Bible has the plants made on one day, and they breathe in CO2 and give off oxygen. Animals made a couple days later, and they breathe in oxygen, give off CO2. Symbiotic relationships. I defy somebody, including you, to find an explanation for how this could evolve slowly over millions of years without resorting to a story. Where is the scientific evidence? Science deals with things we can observe, study, and test. Where is not a story about how it might have happened long ago and far away? I would like to see this happen. Where is the science, which is things we can observe, study, and test? So my goal is to present the truth and expose error, to strengthen the faith of the believers, to win the lost to Christ, including you, and to convert you to the Bible position and to Christ if need be. You claim you're an atheist. I don't think that's possible to be an atheist. I doubt you know everything, and you would have to know everything to know God doesn't exist. You'd have to be in all places at all times at the same time to prove there's no God. That is just simply not possible. You're probably more agnostic, which means ignorant, don't know, but you cannot possibly actually be an atheist, Esteban. You might want to rethink about your title there. Science, definition of science, systemized knowledge derived from observation, study, experimentation, etc. I think all the science says dogs produce dogs, no exceptions. And you say I've been corrected on this a bunch of times. I've never been corrected. People have made statements, but it wasn't a correction. If I said 2 + 2 is 4 and somebody said, no, it's not, it's 5, we corrected you on that. No, they didn't correct me. They gave an error, and they have given some errors saying that I'm wrong about my position here. I'm not wrong. I'm perfectly correct on this one. Some people try to limit the definition of science to the natural world, which you kind of did in your introduction here. The operation of the world might be understood by scientific discoveries. We can understand how it operates. I have a pretty good understanding of how cars operate, internal combustion engines, be it fuel injection or carbureted Venturi-style injection. I think I could take a test against anybody on the basic understanding of how cars operate. That would have nothing to do with how the car originated or was built. Somebody's shaking their mic or breathing into it. Is that you, Esteban? I want to shut his mic off for a second. Okay. The origin of the world may not be understood by scientific discoveries. How it operates can be understood by science. How it originated is not possible to understand how it happened by science. Not possible. Operation of a computer can be understood by science. The origin of the computer is not explained the same way. You have to have a designer. Somebody has to design the computer. And somebody has to design the origin of life, the origin of the planets, the origin of matter, the origin of time, space. It all has to have a designer. Now, religion, a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe. This is evolution to a T. I admit I have a religious belief that God made the world. You guys do not seem capable of admitting that evolution is a religious belief. You believe it. You've never observed any matter create itself out of nothing. You've never observed any matter organize itself without an organizer. You've never observed life come from non-life. You've never observed any animal produce a different kind of animal ever. No farmer in the universe will tell you dogs produce anything but dogs. That's all we observe. When they plant corn, they expect to get corn. And you said, well, of course, that's what we predict. Dogs will always produce dogs. Hovind's been corrected. Esteban, your charts in school show an amoeba or a paramecium or some single-celled organism turning into a dog. Was the original, let's call it a paramecium or an amoeba, Was an amoeba a dog? Do amoebas today still produce amoebas? Well, somewhere along the line, one of those amoebas produced something that was non-amoeba. You guys do not get it. You do believe animals changed into different kinds of animals. And now that they are what they are, the dogs are dogs. Now they're always going to be dogs. And you think I've been corrected? You guys have been corrected on this 1,000 times. It's idiotic to believe an amoeba can turn to a dog. But you do believe that, and the charts show it, and that's my objection. I just want the books to be accurate. I love science. We should teach evolution in a religion class. It is a powerful, believed, many people believe it. Many people believe in Islam too. Many people believe in the sun god. There have been thousands of religions that a lot of people believe in. I think we should teach that to the kids. Hey kids, did you know in India, in Hinduism, millions of people believe if you drink the cow pee, it'll give you superpowers or give you special powers. Okay, they really believe that. It's not true, but it is true they believe that. So that should be taught in a religion class. And we should teach the kids in a religion class, hey, boys and girls, did you know a lot of people believe a big bang of nothing produced everything? And then that nothing got organized and produced a world. And in that hard, rocky planet, which cooled down from a molten mass, slowly life evolved in the soup that formed as it cooled and it rained on the rocks. You do believe you came from a rock, and a lot of people believe it. You are right. And a lot of Christians believe it. You are right, Esteban. It doesn't make it true any more than drinking cow pee is going to give you superhuman powers. So, Bible says in 6 days, the Lord made everything. God claimed that in his book. Now, I freely admit this is my religious belief. I'm not requiring everybody to be taught this in public schools. You guys are requiring everybody to be taught your religion in public schools. The burden of proof's on you, not me, to prove my point. We can test this idea. Was the earth really created in 6 days? Well, let's put it to a scientific test. I predict the universe will show evidence of order and design everywhere we look. Macro, micro, doesn't matter. Look through a telescope or a microscope. You're going to see design everywhere. I predict there will be thousands of symbiotic relationships, and there are. I predict there will be limits to the variations life can produce. Dogs produce dogs, but they're always a dog. You may get a Chihuahua or a Great Dane, but there's a limit. You're never going to get a dog as big as Texas or as small as a flea. There's a limit to the dogs. I wish you guys would admit that. Okay? I predict there will be a purpose to life. What are we here for? Just to survive and produce the most offspring? Well, if the most advanced creatures are men, why do they only produce one baby every 9 months and 20 minutes maximum? Why don't they produce one every 20 minutes period like the amoeba do? If we're the advanced creatures, there's some creatures able to produce 400,000 offspring in their lifetime. They're the most advanced creatures. If that's indeed the only purpose of life is see who can make the most babies. I predict there'll be non-material things like love, justice, mercy, innate knowledge of right and wrong, conscience, truth. Where do these things grow out of the evolutionary theory? Why do people have a sense of mercy? Why would anybody under the evolution theory, you're driving down the highway, you see a lady, her car's broke down, and it's snow all over the place, you want to be merciful and stop and help them. Is there any biological reason why that would go? Why that would even exist? Why would anybody have a sense of mercy? You see somebody who's hurt and you want to help them. I like to see how that evolved in over millions of years. To me, the most ruthless survive. If somebody else is hurt and there's competition for the food supply, man, shoot them. Why would every creature on the planet evolve the ability to produce offspring? Why didn't any of them just evolve the ability to live forever? Why would any animal want to make more babies, which only increases the competition for the food supply? That is exact opposite of what evolution really, really believed. I predict there'll be a way to find the creator, like a book. I got a book right here beside me. I'll read it to you, Esteban, if you want to hear it. I predict there'll be an afterlife where you face the creator. The Bible says before the flood, the people lived to be 900. That's what it says. I predict there will be a creation event and a golden age. There are legends about that. Lots of legends about a golden age when man used to live to be 1,000. I predict there will be skeletons found of people showing signs of growing a larger brow ridge, which never stops growing as you grow. If you could live past 150 or 200, your brow ridge would get pretty big like the Neanderthals. I predict there'll be biological problems like wisdom teeth because we don't live as long now because our jaws don't get as big. 30 seconds. I predict there'll be a longing for the universal Garden of Eden thinking. Anyway, I go through a lot of stuff in my seminar, and my time is about up here, but I want to get to one more point. The evolution worldview, or the creation worldview, teaches there was a flood. The flood explains why there are fossils at all, why there are petrified trees standing up in the vertical position. I cannot believe the answer one guy gave for that. He said they got petrified and then the dirt washed away, and then new layers filled in around it. You've got to be kidding. Stood there for millions of years petrified. Here's one with coal in the bottom and coal on the top. Runs through 2 layers of coal with rock in between. I think these petrified trees in the vertical position defy an evolutionary explanation, and they demonstrate clearly all the layers formed rapidly in one big flood in 1 year. My time is up. Your turn. Take it away, Esteban.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that opening presentation there, Dr. Hovind. Esteban, take the necessary time that you need for your rebuttal, and then we'll allow Dr. Hovind to have equal time. Go ahead.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for being unbelievably predictable.
Right.
Just as I knew you would mention that we believed that we came from a rock and that life came from non-life, and that dogs didn't produce anything but a dog. That's why I said all those things in the beginning, just to clear the air. And you have been corrected on these things many, many times. You know that the law of monophyly states that everything will never outlive its heritage. And and I noticed you forgot to say creationism when you were mentioning all those isms like communism and Nazism, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything we're talking about today. But creationism is, in fact, a religious idea. And you literally just made all the same straw man arguments that I knew you would. And you said that the Bible says that there were plants, and then there were animals, and then there were people. You know, it also says that plants were created before the sun was created. Mm-hmm. So somehow they photosynthesized without ultraviolet light to even available to make their food and grow. So we know that that's not true. That didn't happen. And who's writing this story as God is doing all this thing? Is it the Sumerians? Were they sitting there dictating, writing this all down as they're watching God create the world 6,000 years ago? You said that I don't know everything, so how could I be an atheist? Well, I don't need to know everything to know that there is no God. I know that in the same way that you know that there are no fairies, that there are no ring wraiths, there are no bullrogs, because there is absolutely no evidence to suggest any such thing exists. You don't need to know everything in the world. I don't know who told you that in order to be an atheist, you have to know every single thing and to be absolutely omnipotent. I don't subscribe to the whole, oh, I'm an agnostic atheist because I want to cover my bases and I want to, be a little softer on that and not get myself sucked into some philosophical corner. But you could try to put me in that corner if you want. And then you mentioned evolution again and you said about I've never seen matter coming out of nothing. Well, of course. And also evolution has absolutely nothing to do with matter coming out of nowhere. Nobody anywhere said anything about that. As far as we know, all the matter in the universe has always existed. We don't even know that. Also, you said it says about life coming from non-life, and I've never observed life coming from non-life. Well, no, of course not. And also nothing to do with the theory of evolution. That would be abiogenesis. I know you've heard this word many times before. and about this argument that you like to make about things becoming something else. What you're doing is you're making an argument from incredulity, but not just an ordinary argument from incredulity. No, you have a tactic of planting this logical fallacy inside the minds of your listeners, not just yourself. An example, by asking me how pine trees and elephants are related, you are purposely choosing two organisms that are so vastly different and counting on people, namely your audience, on thinking that it sounds ridiculous. And you know what? The theory of evolution is a lot of times very counterintuitive. But you know what science isn't based on? Intuition. It's based on evidence and logical reasoning. It is based on verifiable data and facts. But you know that your audience will hear the words pine tree, elephant, starfish, whatever you choose for that day, whatever you're in the mood for, and their intuition is just going to tell them, "Oh, that can't be true." This is a tactic that is deliberately misleading. That's why you go back to this all the time. The thing is, you've been saying the things for decades and decades, and your listeners lap all that up. But you first have to show. All you have to do is show how a Chihuahua and a Great Dane are related. I believe you mentioned those two earlier. Well, you would consider them the dog kind. Now, the dog kind and the wolf kind, would you consider those two together the canine kind, or is it still the dog kind? I don't know where you draw these lines. And so on and so forth, up to the bear dog kind and the dog bear kind and the carnivore kind. And is that all one kind? Is it a giant nested hierarchy, or well, that's what we're saying, but they're still part of the mammal kind, aren't they? And then what about reptiles? Are they part of the tetrapod kind or the amniote kind? You haven't drawn any of these lines. You draw them in your head arbitrarily, and you can move the goalpost as needed. You know, what if I show you a fox? Is a fox part of the dog kind, or is it part of a different kind? Is it the fox kind? Are elephants and pine trees related? Yes, they are. They're both part of the eukaryote kind. Does a pine tree ever produce an elephant? No.
I'm sorry to interrupt there, Esteban. I just wanted to let you know that you are at about the 7-minute mark. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's fine. Does a pine tree ever produce an elephant? No, and it never will. And it will produce an ever so slightly different pine tree, still part of the eukaryote kind, or whatever kind it ever was before. I know you know this. I know you know it's a straw man. I know it's a straw man, and maybe we could try not to use that anymore. Anyway, that's about all I had there.
Well, thank you for your rebuttal there, Esteban. We will now move on to Dr. Hovind's rebuttal round. Dr. Hovind, you have approximately 7.5 minutes. Go ahead, take your time.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Esteban. I do say that there are 6 different meanings to the word evolution, just to keep it clear, because you guys can continually try to muddy the water. You give evidence for number 6, microevolution, variations within the same kind, and then try to get to the students to believe this covers it all, like you just did a minute ago, probably not even realizing it. Are they the same kind? Well, they have the subspecies, Canis lupus familiaris, which is the dog. Then there's the species, which does include the dog and the wolf. Man has been trying since he's been around, trying to classify animals and to put them in certain categories. For instance, does it have hair on the outside of its body? Well, then let's put it in a category. We try to do the same thing with tools and nuts and bolts and screws. We try to categorize them into different areas. I think that's just a natural human instinct to want to do that. Is our system correct? I don't know. They change things all the time. They say, oh, that really ought to go in this species over here. Where does a platypus go? I don't know. I mentioned we organize in our shop our screwdrivers in one place, our pliers in another, and our hammers in another. But yet when you get a fencing pliers, which doubles as a hammer, a wire cutter, a bolt cutter, and a crowbar, where do you put that fence pliers at? I don't know, but put it somewhere. I don't think the fence pliers cares where we put it, and I don't think the dog cares where we think it goes. I don't think the wolf cares either. But we've decided to develop a system of classification. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, developed by Carolus Linnaeus. and it holds up pretty good most of the time. You mentioned about a fox. Does a fox fit into the dog kind? Well, people argue about that. It's certainly a canine, so it's considered in the canine family, but is it in the same, are all the carnivores canines? Well, no, the cat is in the carnivore family. So where exactly does the biblical kind fit in? Which is it? Is it genus, family, order? In some cases, it might be genus. In some cases, it might be family. Other cases, it might be order. I don't think the animals care where we put them. I think we're trying very hard to divide them, but I think in most of the cases, a 5-year-old can tell you if they're the same kind of animal, and a 5-year-old can tell you a pine tree and an elephant are not the same kind of life form. Okay? So Mr. Nelson, I saw you with your picture of you with him there, thinks that all life forms are related because they're eukaryotes. Well, that's the domain, eukaryotes, which includes flowers. Do you think flowers, let's take roses as an example, are roses related to dogs because they're eukaryotes, because they have a cell which has a nucleus wrapped in a membrane? Well, in that case, I could say sailboats are related to cars and bicycles because they have metallic nuts and bolts and screws. Well, that proves they're related. This is the kind of stupid logic you guys resort to. Of course they're related. They're both eukaryotes. That was Mr. Nelson's response. You've got to be kidding. That's an answer. All eukaryotes. So I want to cover a couple things here. This 457, I got 10,000 slides here. Science comes from the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge. We know dogs produce dogs. We do not know dogs and elephants are related. We don't know that. You can believe that if you'd like, but it's not something you can know. Science means knowledge. Science, knowledge about or study of the natural world based upon facts learned through experiments and observation. All right? Accessed a couple days ago. I agree. All experiments tell us dogs produce dogs. If you wish to believe otherwise, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but that is your belief. It is not a science. We don't observe elephants produce anything but elephants. Nothing. Okay? What is science? Robert Krampf. Repeated, observed, observation, and experimentation. Knowledge from careful study of the structure and behavior of the physical world, especially by watching, measuring, doing experiments. I agree. That is common sense science. I'm going to try to hit some of the highlights that you covered here that I left behind hanging. Let's see. You said you're not a biologist. I understand. I don't know who gets to decide who's a biologist or not. Biology means the study of life. I suppose you can get a McKinsey 5-year-old brings in a walking stick today. She loves to study life. At what point do they get that cherished title of biologist? Okay. And you mentioned about me doing straw man. I have never done that. The reason I'm telling the same arguments that I told 20 years ago is because they're right. 2 + 2 was 4 5,000 years ago, and 2 + 2 is going to be 4 in 10,000 years. I don't have to change. You guys say, well, science changes all. Yeah, because you're teaching some dumb stuff and mixing it in with science. Real science doesn't change. Real science doesn't need to change. It's right. It's your evolution religion you're trying to dress up as science. Of course, you got to change it all the time. Now, let's see. Family trees, and you had a bunch of those. Life from, 371. Here we go. You guys do teach life, hang on, or organic or evolution, the origin of life. Nobody knows how life, the first living cell, originated. Nobody knows. Wikipedia talks about primordial soup. There's a gradual chemical evolution of particles that contain carbon in the primordial soup. This is the theory. Accessed a couple days ago. Primordial soup, prebiotic soup, hypothetical set of conditions that 4.4 billion years ago where life got started. Okay. Early Earth had a reducing atmosphere. This, by the way, is baloney. Earth has always had oxygen. This atmosphere exposed to energy made soup. The compounds in the soup might have been concentrated at various locations, like oceanic vents. By further transformation, a more complex organic polymer and life developed in the soup. I'm not making this up, Esteban. This is what they're teaching the kids in school. I resent it. This isn't science. If this is science, do it again. Get some soup in the laboratory and make it come alive. And they've not come anywhere close to that. They tried desperately with a lot of taxpayer dollars to make some soup come alive, and they got a few amino acids. That's like dropping toothpicks and making a couple of letters of the alphabet accidentally. Oh, wow, look, I made an H. Oh, wow, over here, boys and girls, here's an M. Look at this. Here's an M with toothpicks. That proves nobody writes the books in the library. That's the logic they're doing. They do not, here's Berkeley University. Many lines of evidence illuminate the origin of life. No, they don't. I'll debate every professor at Berkeley at the same time with half my brain tied behind my back. One guy asked 164 professors at Berkeley to debate. They all refused. So I came and spoke at Berkeley. And I put a chair up on the platform. I said, where are you guys? You believe in evolution? Come on, get up here. Put your money where your mouth is. They do not. Okay, I'll skip all that here. You can learn important hypotheses regarding when, where, and how life originated. This is part of the evolution theory, the origin of life. Now, I know you guys want to limit it to living things once life gets started. I know you desperately want to limit it down to that. Cover all this on my video. Okay, then we cover the macroevolution. Where's the trees of life? Here we go. Right. Hang on. My computer is not going fast enough compared to what I would like to say. The books in school do teach that all life forms have a common ancestor. I'll show you. They do believe, you do teach, you want everybody to be taught that we came from an amoeba, which came from nothing, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. Now, if you wish to believe that, that is perfectly fine. Let's see. Oh, I'm in the wrong one here, part 4. Okay. I'll give you all my slides if you'd like to look at them here. Esteban, come on down to our Dinosaur Adventureland, and as a reward, I'll give you a set of all my videos, my slides, and you can show me which ones specifically have been corrected. I'd like to see that. Variations happen, but they have limits, right? The same slides I've been using for years. Okay, there are quite a variety of shapes of the human nose. There's still a nose. There's quite a variety of shapes of the human ear. There's still an ear. There's a variety of shapes of eyeballs, and there's still an eyeball. Variations certainly happen. There's variations in the foot shape. There's variations in the hand shape. There's variations in skin color. There's variations in lip sizes and styles. There's variations in dogs, but they're still dogs. Here's BBC News. Looks like 95% of current dogs came from 3 original founding females. Well, I think I could believe that. And it was a dog. Well, 3 dogs, okay? They call it divergent evolution. Giving it a fancy name doesn't change the facts. It's still a dog. Dalmatian, poodle, all these dogs came from a common ancestor. There are 2 different species of squirrels now on opposite sides of the Grand Canyon, the Kaibab squirrel and the Abert squirrel. They might have had a common ancestor called a squirrel. You guys believe squirrels are related to pine trees. I think you need some help. Come on down. We'll teach you some real science at Dinosaur Adventureland. Your turn.
Well, thanks so much for that rebuttal, Dr. Hovind. Now we will enter into the free-flowing discussion portion. Now, this will consist, though, of no interruptions and as equally timed as necessary and, of course, possible. I'm hoping that I need not to step in, but if so, of course, I will. We do still need time for a short question and answer. Therefore, what I'm going to do, gentlemen, is give you a 2-minute warning before the discussion is over, and then that way things can be wrapped up. Therefore, go ahead, guys, whoever wants to start.
No, you go ahead, Esteban.
Well, again, you mentioned abiogenesis, and I know you want to tack it onto evolution, but in no textbook on evolution does it also include, as part of the theory, abiogenesis. It might mention it in passing. It might say that, yeah, we don't have an exact working theory of how life came to be in the first place, but they certainly wouldn't say that that is part of the theory of evolution by means of natural selection.
Well, I showed you right on screen, I'll do it again here, that chemical evolution, look up primordial soup in Wikipedia. There's primordial soup, accessed a couple days ago. You have to have life in order to get it to be able to change to other kinds of life. I know you guys are frantically trying to avoid this embarrassing hole in your theory, but what evolved? How did this? So are you telling me that if I let you start with a living thing, we'll take it, make it a single-celled creature, which is incredibly complex on its own. I'll give you a single-celled creature, pick one, and then you could develop all the life forms from that by your theory. Is that what you're telling us? That if we stop the abiogenesis talk, start with life, you really believe everything came from a single-celled creature?
Or something of a protocell. Like I said, we don't have an exact explanation of that. Yeah, we have words like primordial soup. We have all these hypotheses of what may have happened, but we haven't pinned it down yet. But yes, starting with life.
Okay.
That's
Well, if
where
you haven't,
evolution.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's where evolution begins.
So if you haven't pinned it down yet, why are we teaching it in the schools like it's a fact? You guys have to have life before you can have your evolution. You just want to go ahead and teach your religion without giving an explanation of where it started. I think that's grossly unfair. That's tax-supported religion. I don't want to pay for that. Why don't you guys go start a private school and teach your theories to anybody that wants to pay and come learn it? Why don't you do what the Christians have to do? They got to pay for the public school and pay for their private school for their kids to go because they don't want them taught that stuff. If you guys really want them taught that life came from non-living material and this early cell developed into elephants and whales and pine trees, if you really want that taught, go start a private school and pay for it and teach. I don't care what you teach at your own expense. You can teach anything you want. I just don't want to pay for that dumb idea to be taught in the school system. I think most other thinking people resent that also. Go ahead.
I saw you use Wikipedia earlier. Would you consider that a reliable source?
Oh, it shows the popular thinking, of people. I quote from thousands of sources. Wikipedia may or may not be right. I don't know. I'm sitting right beside probably 300 textbooks. This is what my concern is. Is a high school textbook a reliable source? I don't think so. But that's what we're paying for. You're trying to avoid my obvious question. Do you think all of us should be forced to pay to teach the kids that life came from non-living material with no designer, and that first life form somehow developed into whales and pine trees? That is what they're teaching, and this is not from Wikipedia. Some kind of common ancestor developed into all the animals, all the fungi, all the bacteria. Everything came from a common ancestor. This is what they're teaching. This is a public school textbook picture showing that the protista turned into a human. Now, you said that they all stay in their same kind. Well, the protista apparently didn't stay in its kind because the protista turned into everything. So you're either extremely confused or you're lying because you say, well, we teach animals always stay within their same clade. No, you don't. A protista left its clade. In this one, here's the humans up here at the top of the chart. Here's the jellyfish at the bottom, the protista. So the protista turned into everything on this chart. You guys you're simply, I think, extremely confused or deliberately lying or both. You don't want it shown how stupid this is, that a protista could turn to a human in all the different life forms. I'll give you life. I'll let you start with your protista. Is this chart accurate, Esteban? Is this what you believe? That everything can be traced back to a protista?
I'll answer your two obvious questions first. Yeah, I do believe that everything could be traced back to an original life form. I won't say protista. It could have been just any kind of self-replicating. No, not amoeba. They're modern.
Oh, okay. Okay. It was a magical cell. Okay.
No, they are just as evolved as we are. But anyway, and yes, I do think that it should be taught in our public schools because it is a fact.
Hold on, wait, let's slow down. This is a fact, and this should be taught in public schools. It is a fact that humans and whales and jellyfish came from a single-celled organism, call it whatever you want, some kind of magical cell that could produce varieties, whereas today, single-celled creatures, of which there are bazillions, they only produce the same kind. But somehow it was different in the past. Would you explain how that is science?
It wasn't different in the past. It's exactly the same. But
so a protista is exactly the same as a whale, or this single cell, whatever you want to call it, is the same as a whale.
Is that what I just said? No, it's
you said they didn't change.
The process has not changed.
The process that turned a single-celled organism to a whale. That process. Where can I see this process happening today? Where is any animal producing anything other than its obvious kind?
It won't. You know it won't.
That's I know it won't. Bingo.
The clades stack up.
The clades stack up.
Yes, you are. You're a human. You're an ape. you're a monkey, you're a primate. It goes all the way back, and you collect all the things that you were before.
So I'm a collection of all of these. Am I a jellyfish too?
No, our lineage didn't come from a jellyfish, but if you trace both the jellyfish lineage and our lineage back far enough, it will meet up at one point.
So if we all came from a single-celled creature, is your brain just a collection of these chemicals that got together by chance over billions of years? And if so, how can you explain reasoning processes? And maybe you got some chemicals in there backwards, Esteban.
Not by chance, but by natural processes, such as natural
I think
selection.
it was a natural process. You chose to have the chemicals in there backwards in this case. You chose to believe that we came from a single-celled organism. That's not science. Why can't you just admit, hey, Kent, you're right. This is something I believe. I cannot prove this. There are plenty of single-celled creatures out there. Go get a laboratory full of them and turn them into a whale again, or turn them into anything else. Where's this? Where can I see them even changing? By the way, where is the 95% dog? If the dogs came from a protista, somewhere along the line it was a 95% dog and a 94%, 92%. Did all of them die out and all we have today are the 100% dogs? Where is the 95% dog? I'd like to see one.
I'm not actually sure I even understand the question of 95% dog. Everything is 100% of what it is at all times. At all times in history, you were always 100% human, I'm assuming. Your children will be human 100%. Their children will be human 100%. But they will be a little bit different. Notice that you don't produce exact clones. You don't produce, I will say that Eric is an awful lot like you, but you do not produce clones. It's a little bit different. You know how this works. I know
I
you
do.
know how to read.
That's what I'm trying to help you understand. I know how it works.
And by the way, the reason why I brought up Wikipedia is not because I didn't think it was a reputable source. It's just that I wanted to make sure that if I gave you the Wikipedia definition of what a religion is, just the brief thing that that would be acceptable to you, and then we can compare that to
Somebody fix it.
we can compare that definition to what we teach in biology, and if it has anything to do with that at all. It says religion is a social, cultural system of design, behaviors, and practices, morals, worldviews, texts, sanctified places, prophecies, ethics, or organizations that relate humanity to supernatural, transcendental, or spiritual elements.
Boy, that's evolution to a T, isn't it?
Where's the spiritual element or the supernatural or the social and cultural behaviors and practices and morals? It has nothing to do with any of those things.
Well, yeah, morals, you guys would love to avoid that. That's the whole purpose of your religion, is to try to get you away from any accountability to a creator. Do you think when you die, Esteban, you're going to give any accountability for what you've done in your life?
Well, I have accountability now.
Okay, so if you murdered your neighbor and got by with it and stole all his stuff and he never knew it, and nobody ever knew it, and you got by, nobody ever found out, would there ever be a reckoning for that murder of your neighbor and stealing everything, or is that okay to do as long as you can get by? If the lion can eat the baby zebra and nobody can stop him, well, is that okay?
Is it okay? No.
The lion thinks it's great, got a free meal. I don't think the mama zebra likes it. I sure don't think the baby zebra likes it.
And it's tough. I mean, yeah, you would want to have some justice, and hopefully the murderers get caught and they go to prison. But if they get away with it, then I mean, that's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it.
Okay.
So
well,
sorry
we've left a lot of time. You've accused me of basically lying on numerous occasions. I'd like you to. What's your best specific one you think I'm lying about? I may try to write frantically, but any particular lies you'd like me to defend myself on?
That evolutionists say that we came from rocks.
I show hundreds of quotes about. Do you believe the Earth was a hot molten mass at one time, 4.6 billion years ago, and it cooled down from a hot molten mass like lava and developed a hard rocky crust? Do you believe that? I could show you in the books if I had time to find it, but there's hundreds of books. That's what they teach. Do you believe the Earth began as a hot ball of rock that cooled off from molten rock? Yes or no?
Is the Earth a living thing that reproduces?
Oh, I didn't ask that. Did the Earth begin as a hot ball of rock that cooled down and solidified?
Yes.
Okay.
But
did it then begin to rain? What's that?
The counter question to that is, do you believe that the Earth is a living thing that reproduces?
Oh, I didn't say. I don't care if it. No, obviously it's not. But you do believe it was a hot ball of rock from a big bang or whatever, and it cooled down, and then it began to rain on the rocks for millions of years and produced ponds of soup of some kind, like I showed you right from quite a few sources, Berkeley University. Life started in this soup in the oceans, which came from the hot rocks that were from the Big Bang where nothing exploded. I know you guys don't like it put so simply, but I like to keep it real simple. I don't want to hide behind nothing. You think you came from a rock, Esteban. You really do.
1 minute, guys. 1 minute for the discussion.
Right. So do you think that I think that rocks are living things that reproduce?
I can't figure out how you think a rock was your great-great-grandpa, but that is what your religion ultimately boils down to.
Do you think that rocks are living things that reproduce?
Absolutely not. But I think a designer, a smart person, could take the minerals in the rocks and develop things like cars or computers. I think an intelligent designer could take minerals right out of the ground and make computers, cars, boats. But it has to take an intelligent designer to take those rocks or dust and make man, in the case of man in the Bible. Intelligent designer could do that. Intelligent designers built this remote control out of things right out of the rocks. Every one of them, right out of the dirt. That can happen. Yes, sir. You think it happened by itself. I don't think a bottle cap could happen by itself. I think somebody had to design it. You guys believe elephants and whales came by themselves from the soup, which came from a rock. I wish you could admit that's your belief and then go teach it in a private school. Quit teaching it at my expense. I'm sick of it. Go ahead.
Okay, gentlemen, and I'll give you a chance there, Esteban. We have concluded the discussion portion. We've got just a couple questions for each of the debaters, but I think it might be good to give you both a minute or whatever you feel is necessary just to wrap things up in the form of a concluding statement, if that works for you guys.
Works for me. Right now?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I have attempted to get through to make you understand a simple thing, and the reason for the counter questions at the end is because the two things have nothing to do with each other. Rocks are not reproductive life forms, and so that's not what the theory of evolution is even talking about. That rocks is geology. Things happen, and we're not talking about abiogenesis either. We're talking about already having life. So do I think that we came from rocks? No, I do not. That is a straw man fallacy. If I've ever seen one. And I've tried to explain it in several ways and ask these questions so that it made you think about it. I don't know. It's been fun, though.
I lost the page.
Awesome. Well, you took about 1 minute there, Esteban, so thanks for wrapping things up. We can now hand it over to Kent for his concluding statements.
Okay. Here's a 2005 biology textbook. I have hundreds of them. I have 2018, I think, is my newest. They're expensive, okay? Let's see. The early origin of life experiments. Why is there a whole section in here, how life got started from non-living material, if it's not part of biology? Take it out of the book. Tear these pages out and teach it in a religion class. You want to start with life. I understand why you do, too, because that's a major hurdle. But if it's really not part of biology, This is my objection, Esteban. It's taught in the biology classes like it is part of biology, and it's not. It's a religious belief. I wish you guys would quit being hypocritical. Stand up for what you believe is true and say, look, get that out of the books. That's not part of our theory. Okay, well then get it out of the books. Help me out. I'll be glad to help you on that one. You can get a picture of you and me, arms around each other with a picture, and I'll have standing for truth on my, or whatever it said. I want religion out of the schools too, the evolution religion. So, all right, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your concluding statement there, Dr. Hovind. It's been a very good debate, very lively. The time has flown by. We do just have a couple short questions for each of the debaters from the audience. I saved them here, so let me just pull them up real quick, and we'll get the questions going. So the first question I have here is for Esteban. The question is from Sin Not, is his name in the chat. He asks, well, if biology best explains evolution, then ask him, how do you deal with the fact that there exist 3 main mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, which points us right back to Noah's 3 daughters-in-law? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't know anything about mitochondrial haplogroups. I mean, I really can't answer that question. I made it. I said in the beginning, I'm not a biologist. I just understand the overall basic concepts. I have some examples of things. I'm well convinced myself. But I can't answer very specific little questions.
No problem. And if the other debater wants to do a quick response at the end of each question, that's okay as well.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with that. I've heard little bits about it, about the mitochondrial DNA going to Noah's 3 daughters, but I'm not asking for that to be taught. I think the evidence, I believe that story is true, that Noah built the ark, and he and his sons and their wives were the only survivors on there, and his wife, Noah's wife, and that all humans came from those 3 reproducing couples. That I believe that's true. And I think real scientific evidence would be unable to refute that, and possibly someday could prove it to be true. But again, I'm not making everybody pay for that to be taught. He wants everybody to pay to teach we all came from a rock, and that is what they teach. Okay.
Thank you for your responses, gentlemen. Next question is for Dr. Hovind. He asks, Tony Reed says the hydroplate theory has a heat problem. Is this true? And if so, how would it be solved?
That would take hours to explain. On my video series, I talk about Walt Brown's theory, which I think is correct. A hydroplate, meaning the crust of the earth is broken up into plates. And I think everybody agrees it is broken up into plates. And there's some are moving around the fault lines, etc. I taught Earth Science 15 years. We could talk all day on that if you'd like. Walt Brown says under about 10 miles of rock, there used to be a layer of water, which seems to be what the Bible teaches. And that broke forth and went shooting up to the top along these fault lines. And the plates of earth, huge trillions of pounds of plates of earth, slid on this water while it was escaping. Hydroplate. I think that's true. I think it's logical. It's much more logical than thinking all this massive earth was squeezed into a dot smaller than a period on a page. That's ridiculous. But I think the hydroplate theory, the movement of rock sliding on other rock would produce enormous amounts of heat. I agree. The water would provide one buffering force. The second buffering force, I'm very strongly in the camp of those who believe there was a canopy of ice above the atmosphere, probably 10 miles up. Anybody that's ever sprayed a can of hairspray or spray paint knows when you release pressure, it takes the heat away. It gets cold in your hand. So if the atmosphere was squeezed down to 10 miles and that broke open at the same time, the expanding atmosphere would absorb all that heat. So I think they balanced out. But again, I'm not asking for all that to be taught. I think there's a lot of research been done on the hydroplate theory. So far, I'm not aware of anything scientifically that has proven it incorrect. If you had something heating up the earth, like raining, latent heat of condensation when it rains, and you had an expanding atmosphere at the same time, it'd be a canceling effect.
Thanks for that response and answer, Dr. Hovind. Esteban, did you have a quick response to that as well?
Hydroplate theory, is this a creationist thing?
No, it's evolutionist.
Well, whatever you just said, it sounded like completely crazy. So I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood you.
Okay, well, you know what? We'll go on to the next question then. This one is from Guzman, 1611. Guzman asks Esteban, what is his explanation for the human artifacts and bones found in the South Carolina phosphate beds, which contains dinosaur bones? Go ahead, Esteban.
Oh, wow. So specific. I guess, okay. They contain dinosaur bones. What, modern dinosaurs? Like the birds? Human bones have never been found in the same strata as dinosaurs, unless there was an earthquake or some kind of crazy event that turned things up. I don't know anything about this specific case. Again, it's so specific. like I know all this stuff, but so I can't really speak on that specific thing. You know what I mean? I don't want to sound like I think I know everything or anything like that. Humility, you know.
Well, thanks for that answer there, Esteban. Did you have a quick response, Dr. Hovind?
Yeah, the phosphate beds in South Carolina that were mined out mostly about 100 years ago, they were digging out phosphates. There are many books have been written about it. I've got a couple in my library here about them finding all sorts of strange things in these phosphate beds, including dinosaur, human artifacts, and dinosaur bones have been found together. Esteban, if somebody told you dinosaurs, and I don't mean birds are not dinosaurs. That's one of the really dumbest theories they've come up with. But dinosaurs, giant reptiles, have been found. There's evidence of them living with man from all over the world from many sources. They always lived with man. The Bible says everything was made in 6 days, and the phosphate beds are just one of thousands of examples where there's evidence, physical evidence of them living together. I will point out, I don't think anybody has ever in the world found human bones and chicken bones in the same rock strata. Would that prove humans and chickens did not live at the same time? Would that be a logical conclusion? We got chickens in our yard over here. No, they did live at the same time, but you don't normally find their bones together when a catastrophe, because humans don't hang out with chickens a lot. So the fact that bones are not found together is not an evidence against them living together. I don't know how you guys can't see the third grade level common sense behind that. However, with that said, I will say I think they have been found together, and the Carolina phosphate beds are one of many examples of that.
Well, thanks for the response there, Dr. Hovind. This is the final question that we have from Matt Bond in the chat. He asks for Kent. He says, because there is evidence that floods have happened, how does that prove it was a global flood as spoken of in the Bible? Floods and natural disasters happen all the time. Go ahead.
Oh, floods happen all the time. I've been through 4 hurricanes, tornadoes. Yeah, it happens all the time. It doesn't prove the Bible at all. I think that there are continent-wide sediment layers, like limestone. One layer covers a huge part of the United States. So this would be a really big flood. I think, but see, I'm not asking everybody to pay for my flood story in the Bible to be taught. I think it'd be silly for God to tell Noah to build an ark if it's going to be a local flood. Tell him to move. I think you could move anywhere with 120 years warning. So I think the whole story would be silly if it's just a local flood. Certainly there are hundreds of legends of a worldwide flood. Why would there be 330 now, I believe, flood legends? Creationism.org has a list of them and tells all about them. So I do believe in the worldwide flood. I do believe the Bible story is exactly correct. However, I'm not asking that to be taught at taxpayer expense.
Awesome. And did you have a quick response to that, Esteban?
I just lost my my train of thought. I did. Oh yes, about the point of there being so many flood myths. I take that as the exact opposite of confirmation. It just means that people copied and pasted. Basically, they're just like change a little detail here, a little detail there. We know this happens, interpolations and then redactions of interpolations, and different stories evolve over time, and then they branch off into different myths and legends, and so that really. And we know people exaggerate a lot. So, yeah, one large flood in one local area could have been a story that really happened, and then it evolved and became 300 different myths. It doesn't confirm a global flood whatsoever.
It's Okay, well, thank you to both debaters for all your answers to the questions from the audience. It's been a great debate. It's definitely going to be one to remember. Before we shut it down, if the two debaters wanted to plug in their channels, advertise what they're doing, I'm fine with that.
Twitter is the only thing I like to plug. I'm going to be.
Go ahead, Esteban. What are you trying to do?
My Twitter is the only thing I like to plug. I'm going to be starting a channel on YouTube in the near future where we talk about all the stuff that Ken Hovind hates, and hopefully we can make him mad a few times. But other than that, my Twitter is Posteriori Unum. I suppose they could link that in the description or something for spelling, but that's my Twitter account. And I'm usually on there pretty much every day, so feel free to send a direct message and follow.
And if you have some final words there, Dr. Hovind, go ahead.
Well, sure. Yes. My name's Ken Hovind. We have Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama, straight north of Pensacola, Florida, 70 miles. Our YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official, Hovind, Hovind, it's a Norwegian name, Kent Hovind Official. Our website, drdino.com. If anybody would like to come by, we can take a tour of our science center where we teach real science, that God made the world. And it's all free. Come on down. We have 10 lakes for boating and fishing, and bring a four-wheeler, sign a paper that if you break your leg, you're fixing it, not me, because you cannot guard against stupid. And so we let stupid people come here and ride their four-wheeler and have a good time up and down the sand dunes. And if you break your leg, we'll haul you to the hospital, but that's about it. Drop you off at the door and let you fix it on your own. So we have a blast around here. We have visitors coming from all over the world to see this place, and we want to teach truth. The truth is, nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog, so it's logical to say maybe God made the dogs, and they've produced variations within that kind. The truth is, God made everything in 6 days, and dinosaurs always lived with man. They did not live millions of years ago. Anybody teaches dinosaurs lived millions of years ago is woefully ignorant of the facts. They were just called by different names, dragons or something like that in different cultures. But there's overwhelming evidence of dinosaurs living with man. And I'm just sick and tired of the evolutionists taking over our school system. And I think I'm going to make myself a T-shirt trying to get the religion of evolution out of our schools. Thank you for the idea, Esteban. Come on down, visit Dinosaur Adventureland. Be glad to give you a tour.